Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Cath Lab Chat. This week, we have a very special guest, or two guests, as a matter of fact. We have Rebecca Jones, President and CEO of Sharp Medical, and their focus is on cardiovascular professionals in travel assignments, permanent placement, and they also incorporate education, which we'll get into in the podcast. But their whole deal is they're more of a solution to your staffing needs than just kind of providing warm bodies. We will also have Chris Mick, who is the clinical director for cardiovascular services with 15 years experience. He will be on to give the clinical portion of their company's focus. And just to kind of throw it out there and add it on, I mean, this isn't really a small company. They have been awarded this year's fastest growing company by INC 5000 or Inc. 5000. It's a woman-owned company. They're a member of NATHO, as well as being JACO certified. You know, these kind of guys are doing something really different with staffing, and I kind of bumped into them by accident. A friend of a friend of a friend, as well as Frankie knows them, and they just have a different approach. And we started this show, we started the whole podcast with Brad and learning about traveling from the perspective of a traveler. And this week we have the owner and operator of a traveling company, and not just any traveling company, one that's really kind of redefining what traveling is and what they do. I think, you know, the industry has changed a lot over the last 10 years, and some companies have, stayed the same and, they're the steady through the storm, and some people are trying to innovate and do something different. And I think that's what Sharp's doing. And I know a lot of this is going to sound like I'm getting paid by them, and I guarantee you I'm not. So it may sound like a commercial, but I have to tell you that you're going to hear the passion in Rebecca's voice, and she believes in what she's doing, and I believe in what she's doing. And I'm excited to just kind of learn a lot more about what goes on behind the scenes. And that's what I learned in the process of learning what makes them different. I kind of learned what's going on now. So maybe you guys will learn something along the way. So that's kind of what this podcast is about. But right in the beginning, I just want to take a second to thank everybody that's downloaded the podcast and all that. I really appreciate it. We are just about to crest over 300 downloads. Again, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you consider the average podcast gets 150 downloads a month, we're barely over a month old, and we have double that, especially since this is kind of a niche thing. The Cath Lab, there's not a lot of us out there. I mean, when you consider the amount of hospitals that there are and the amount of staff that are in each hospital, we're just a really small group. So I'm really happy to have 300 downloads. I'd love you to keep telling everybody that you know that works in the Cath Lab about it, so they can tell their friends. I'd hope to bring this overseas and get into the Cath Labs over there, so I can start talking to some people working over there and see what they do differently. I think you guys might be into that too, as well as maybe someday talking about international traveling. This isn't going to be a traveling podcast. It just happens to be, I know that a lot of you are interested in what it is to travel. We're going to have a lot of other subjects on here. And again, I want to hear from you guys about what those subjects might be that you want to hear more about. So kind of getting right into it. This is very similar to the Brad podcast, where I just kind of get in there, start peppering them with questions right off the bat. So let's go ahead and not waste any more time, and I'm going to talk to you guys at the end. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the podcast, Rebecca, and thanks for being on.
Thanks so much for having me today.
So let's just get right into it. So how did you decide to get into the staffing world?
Yeah, well, prior to staffing, I actually was in sports nutrition for many years and had also been in the real estate business. I was actually working at a company that was next door to a medical staffing company that specialized in radiology and cardiology. And the owner actually had approached me, and I ended up going to work there and stayed there for a couple of years, and then moved on to another company in the Omaha metro area and kind of finished out my career there until I went ahead and started Sharp Medical.
So what gave you the ambition to go out on your own? That's kind of a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Honestly, I've been an entrepreneur mentality my whole life. Grew up in and around a lot of friends that were entrepreneurs and just knew that someday I would be one as well. But really, it comes down to when I had started in the business, I truly enjoyed medical staffing. I really enjoyed my 8 years, little over 8 years before I went out on my own, and just kind of had decided that a lot of what I was seeing in the industry was kind of creating, a lot of companies had created kind of a culture that was more of a business kind of mentality where it was kind of a business first model. And I kind of had transitioned more towards I'd like to start a company where it could be more of a traveler first model where the travelers could kind of have some say and really kind of get their opinions on what could be better in the industry. And so starting out on my own, I reached out to a lot of the people that I knew from the industry, a lot of former travelers, and they helped me create Sharp Medical, and they've kind of helped me create what it is today.
Awesome. So getting right into it, you kind of touched on a little bit, but what makes you different from the other companies that you work for?
Yeah, well, here at Sharp, we have an honest and ethical culture here at the company. I personally do not allow unethical dishonesty within my sales team and also my admin staff as well. We don't treat travelers like a number. We truly treat every individual in this company as a very highly valued employee. And unfortunately, there are too many companies out there that are working on a number-based mentality every week, and they create the culture that travelers kind of become a number. And here at Sharp, we really are trying to help build the Cath Lab EP and IR community by implementing, better training, cross-training, so hospitals can have a better peace of mind knowing that they are not going to be short-staffed. Training and education is a vital role for us in the success of what we do and in this industry as a whole. So we do have in-house clinical staff here that actually come from cardiovascular and that actually come from the Cath Lab itself, which is very unique because a lot of staffing agencies do not have a lot of the clinical staff. So we kind of found some amazing people that come from that field to kind of join us in our vision here at Sharp. We have a very, very high standard, and our company kind of started off mostly as a referral-based company. Our kind of whole vision with that is we want to be the most elite in the travel industry, and we want to really help build a strong team for our client facilities. So they have a really good company to really rely on from the aspect of we understand what their needs are, but we also have the clinical staff that can be here to really help them get the good quality travelers that every facility wants throughout the entire nation. So what we're really doing is we're just trying to create a better value to the entire industry for everyone, and really kind of help increase that quality of travelers and really prove top quality and care for our client facilities.
So I know we've talked about it before, but what you're saying without saying it is also that you're very selective with your travelers, and you don't just take somebody who wants to travel. You're looking for the elite group of people who have experience, who are going to represent your company in the best way possible, and that's the way that you grow your business.
That's absolutely correct. And that is absolutely the vision of what we do. And that is what we do every day. And, we as a company, we have so many amazing internal, staff here that really kind of help facilitate that the credibility of who we are out to those client facilities. And in order to be able to say, hey, this is who we are as a company. We have to prove it. And the way you prove that is truly by the people that we are employing into these particular facilities. And thanks to all the amazing travelers out there that we work with, our name has become one of the elite companies for cardiovascular services.
So while we're talking about how you guys are able to get the more top tier talent, we also kind of need to get into how staffing companies work and how does the current staffing market work? Because I know we're going to talk about what a VMS is and what an MSP is. So why don't you kick us off with what those two different things are and how you guys are different?
Yeah, so staffing has really changed over the last 13 years since I've been in the industry. 13 years ago, kind of taking you back to 2006 here. Without kind of getting into the VMS and the MSP model yet, our contracts back then were really mostly all direct contracts. There was very few companies in the industry, and there was very limited competition within cardiovascular services itself. So as time has went on, more and more companies have really kind of, a lot of the bigger companies, a lot of people have branched out from those companies and started their own. And I think everybody, kind of wants to branch out on their own, create something different, and kind of create their own vision. But what I kind of see that's happened is that now we just kind of have an industry where we have a very large network of options now. People have a very large group of options, but truly within cardiovascular services, there is not a lot of options. And when I say that, yes, everybody that's in medical staffing for the most part is doing kind of a lot of different mixture of staffing, but really focusing on that very specialized market, there's really not that many companies out there that do it. So truly, what we are able to do that a lot of different companies, in the market, are not currently doing or have not been able to do is, again, we've really created a very high quality position to where we are servicing these clients at the highest level possible with the highest quality of the elite professionals that are out there in Cath Lab, EP, and IR. We have been able to negotiate direct deals at, very, great rates, so where we can pay travelers the money that they have been missing out on over, the course of these last 13 years. We hear daily that travelers just in general feel like the market rates have shifted and they have decreased over the last several years. And we have had to have those conversations with those people that is incorrect. That is not accurate information. The market rates have technically went up because the demand for high quality, cardiovascular professionals is increasing by the day. The issue we run into is we kind of sometimes get into these roadblocks where we're trying to negotiate a high rate for one of our elite travelers. However, that's kind of where the MSP and the VMS model comes into play. And sometimes we just really aren't able to negotiate on those rates. They're set rates that these companies have set with these facilities. And in order for us to place the traveler, we actually have to subcontract or work with one of the kind of what we call a third party in order to do the deal. In our opinion, though, as a whole, the industry has definitely, I foresee the market rates increasing over the course of the next several years. So I definitely don't think the market is going down anytime soon.
So basically the biggest difference between what you guys do and what everybody else is doing is, you're dealing direct versus these other companies that go through the VMS or the MSPs. So real quick, what are VMS and MSPs and how do they affect every travel company's ability to negotiate?
Sure. So we do work with some VMS and MSPs out there, and there are some amazing ones that we work with that we have great relationships with. It's a very competitive market anymore, so you are starting to see that more of these companies are starting to exist because I think they've kind of realized that that's kind of what hospitals want, and kind of what a VMS and an MSP is it's a VMS stands for a vendor managed service. And what that means is hospitals sometimes like to hire one company to kind of outsource all their staffing needs that not only can do their staffing for all of their clinical specialties within the hospital, but also be able to do their payroll and the compliance that kind of encounters all of that. So you're starting to see more hospitals go to that model just for, just for the sake of it saves them a lot of time, it saves them a lot of money. They're not having to manage, 50 contracts. It's kind of all being managed under one entity. There's so much power to that, and there's so much value to that I understand why hospitals are starting to go down the road of using this. 13 years ago, VMS and MSPs were very rare in our industry. It's really kind of been in this last, I would say, about 10 years. It's really started to evolve, and it's kind of now kind of taken over well more than 50-60% of that market. So most hospitals do have some sort of a vendor management system or a managed service provider in place for these. Some VMS systems are managed independently. They're not a staffing company. And then there are some that actually are staffing companies in our industries that kind of have formulated their own network to be able to then capture kind of those jobs within these facilities and then outsource them or subcontract them out to other staffing companies. So the issue that we see with cardiovascular in particular is this is such a highly specialized area, and understanding the dynamics of Cath lab, electrophysiology, and interventional radiology is so vital in making sure we are sending out the right people into these positions in the right facilities. So typically, in the VMS or MSP scenarios, we are not allowed to contact the facilities or contact the managers in these particular labs. And what happens is this does sometimes create a more difficult situation for facilities to be able to find the right candidate if this is a particular travel position that they're looking to fill. Just because we all know that every lab is set up differently. Every Cath lab, every electrophysiology lab, every interventional lab out there is very different in how they do things or what procedures they're doing or just the type of dynamic of how they operate. So it's a very difficult situation as an agency when we are told, hey, this facility has a need, but then we're not really allowed to kind of figure out what all that need actually entails. So it does make it difficult sometimes to fill those positions with the right candidates because we don't know up front what exactly that role is going to be. And it is harder for us to source the right people. It does get a little frustrating, and we definitely don't want to waste any of the facility's time, especially if we're sending over a candidate if it ends up not being a good fit. So we kind of want to be able to find them the right fit right out of the get-go, meaning we want to know all those details up front first.
And by finding the right candidate, you're specifically talking about like if a lab has a high cardiac volume but a low IR volume, but they're a combo lab, it's going to be listed as a combo lab. And, people are going to think they're going to have to do both, but in reality, they might be just specifically looking for a cardiac person, or they might be specifically looking for an IR person, and they don't care if you have the other. But that information you don't get, and you can't pass along to your travelers, because you can't have that direct conversation with them to figure out what their needs are, what the overall layout of their lab is. So if they have a structural lab or an IR lab or a neuro situation, like we have all 5, but most oftentimes we're looking for travelers with IR experience, because that's what we do the most of. We do all 5, but our lab does more IR than anything. So we're looking for that more than structural or EP, because we have people to do that. So you guys don't get that information from these VMS style systems, because you're not allowed to have that direct contact. And so you're not necessarily meaning that your traveler will be a good fit because they're not a good fit. It's because they're not a good fit for the needs of that particular lab. They're a great tech, but maybe they have different strengths, and you have somebody else that would fit better for them. But you don't get that opportunity because you don't get that information. And so you're kind of shooting blind, and it doesn't give you an opportunity to represent yourself well because you don't get that information.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And I even see this a lot, we work in all states. So you'll see a lot of differences between a lot of states. And, and I know kind of going into the tech role of an ARRT and an RCIS, and some states, and I know this is probably a conversation for another podcast, right? But you do find certain states where they prefer an ARRT, or they need an ARRT versus the RCIS. And then you'll see some states that prefer the RCIS over the ARRT. And then obviously, California, is its own state, where, 90 to 95% of the time, they are requiring that ARRT California licensed person that has the California fluoro. And that kind of creates another hurdle, because there is not a lot of California fluoro trained, cath lab individuals out there. But it is very difficult sometimes when, again, we don't have that direct contact right into that department, finding out how their lab is set up, how many labs, how many cases they're doing in a day. If it's structural, are they doing EP? Are they doing interventional radiology? And if they are doing EP, what types of EP, what are they doing? And what are they having those techs do? Are they solely only scrubbing devices, or do they really need them to be able to do some of the measuring and the pacing? So again, every lab is so different in what they need. So it's very important to have that direct contact. And that's kind of, what we're seeing that sometimes is, it's frustrating for the travelers as well. They ask us questions, they want to know more details, and it's hard sometimes to give them the details unless we've had somebody that's worked there that we can kind of tell them that inside information on what we know.
So with these VMSs and MSPs, I know that we normally interview our travelers. Do they have an interview process that they go through before they accept the position there? Or is it more of they just deal with you, you send them over there, and that's how the contact is created?
Yeah, so it depends. Some of the companies do kind of a pre-screen on the candidates first, and then they're being forwarded over to the directors. And again, sometimes that issue is, the individuals doing those pre-screens are not cardiovascular professionals themselves. And, and that can be unfortunate. But I would say the majority of the time when we submit the candidate, those people, the VMS systems or the MSP systems are forwarding then those profiles over to the managers for them to decide. But there are certain cases where that is not the case, and they are being pre-screened by the agency that is running that particular MSP or that particular VMS model.
Yeah, and I think that specifically gives way to one of the other pieces of what your company does different, which is you specifically hire people that have verified experience that can, do anything that's set in front of them within their their scope that they've deemed. They tell you what they can do, and then you verify that it's the case, versus you get other travelers who may not get picked up by you, who will promise the world and then show up empty-handed and not be able to deliver on the skills that they've said they would. But going through these VMSs or MSPs, these non-clinical people don't know the difference. They don't know how to source out the people that have promised the world and can't deliver versus the people who have the experience and can sit down and walk into that lab on day one and be fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. What we're finding is, from talking to a lot of the facilities we work with on a direct basis, a lot of facilities that we work with have actually used a third party, a VMS, an MSP of some sort in the past or even at the present. And the biggest, kind of complaint that we get from the facilities is that it's frustrating for them to have to sift through, a lot of profiles that, maybe they're not even a cath lab tech. Maybe they're a CT tech and they're being submitted to a job in the cath lab, or maybe they're just a diagnostic x-ray tech that's because they have a California license and a California fluoro, that recruiter at that company sometimes doesn't know how to differentiate the difference between what a diagnostic x-ray tech does and what an actual cath lab tech does. Just because they have the same credential, meaning they're both ARRT and they both have a California license and they both have a California fluoro, does not mean that they're both, able to perform, into the same role, especially the cath lab, because we all know that diagnostic x-ray is completely different than working as an x-ray tech in the cath lab.
Yeah, for sure. And so I think we want to talk about how you guys really, as a staffing company, end up being needed, and what do you see wrong with the travel industry as it is to create this need, this staffing need to start with?
So one of the issues that we see in the current travel industry is across the entire nation, we have a shortage of talent that is specialized in the cath lab, the EP, and the IR areas. What we're seeing is, there's definitely a lack of training, leadership in a lot of these facilities to really be able to give these people, the success that they deserve. Sometimes this is definitely an ongoing issue with, a lot of what we're hearing from a lot of our client facilities is that they just don't know where to get the people. They don't know how to recruit properly trained people. So a lot of facilities are now shifting towards we're going to kind of train our own staff. We're going to cross train, which I think is excellent. And I think a lot of facilities should definitely be looking into, developing a good preceptorship program and training their internal staff or cross training. I really think that's going to be super successful in the ongoing needs of their lab. Just because right now, like I said, there's such a huge need for highly trained cath lab, EP, and IR professionals, but we also have a huge need for management and leadership. So the other thing that I'm seeing because of this, kind of, a lot of hospitals are kind of running on, they're kind of running on this very small group of a team, to where the on-call burnout is increasingly daily. A lot of people are leaving the cath lab in IR areas because the on-call burden is so large, and it's very hard, for people, especially individuals that have families and children, taking call sometimes 20 to 25 days a month. Not only is that, this is highly dangerous for any individual to be, doing, because, you're taking call, you're turning back around, you're working a full day the next day, and you're sometimes getting called in. I mean, you can be called in 2, 3, times a night, getting, literally running on fumes. And not only is this very dangerous for the employee, the facility, but this is highly dangerous for the patients also. So what we're trying to kind of create is helping these facilities with the on-call issue. And I get, using a traveler is not sometimes the most cost effective way, but if that means reducing the bad outcomes for the patients and the facilities, then, in our eyes, bringing in a traveler is really that the value, they really shouldn't be looking at the dollars at that point. The value is so high to bring somebody in to really help them with the on-call ratios.
Yeah. And like you said before, it's people are leaving because of this. And
Yes.
The cost of training a replacement for somebody who's burnt out on a call is significantly higher, or the cost of retraining somebody is significantly lower than paying a traveler to come in and give somebody that break. And we all need a break. And especially if you're doing that many hours of call and callback, like, everybody needs a break. Everybody's going to get burnt out. And if they can find a better deal elsewhere, they're going to look for it. And if they find a deal that's not as good elsewhere, they might just take it for a better work-life balance. And I know that I've done that. I was working 20, 25 days of call in Phoenix before I left to go anywhere else, because I just couldn't do it anymore. And I was willing
Sure.
to take a chance on anything, which was my first travel assignment. So I definitely see exactly what you're talking about, because I was absolutely one of those people, and it is absolutely cheaper now that I'm on the other end of bringing in travelers. It is absolutely cheaper to have a traveler and pay a traveler than it is to spend 6 months to a year training somebody that we're going to hire who will get burnt out and may not make it 3 years and then replace them again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the long-term goal, here's the reality, is the long-term goal of every hospital should be to have a staff that is loyal, and to have a staff that is truly not made up of a bunch of travelers. That is the goal, and that should be the goal of every single facility out there. But the reality is that there's just not enough people out there that are trained to be able to just fill all these voids. So cross-training right now and looking at companies, such as ourselves, that can really come in and help you, not only just with that temporary solution with travelers, but really help you with the ongoing, issues that you may have in the staffing ratios, or to use companies like ourselves that can go out and get you amazing preceptors and great leadership teams and interim, directors and people that can really come in and help kind of restructure that balance so the employees don't get burnout and don't leave. So it's definitely worth paying the money to get good people in there. And also, you got to keep the doctors happy, right? So it's very important for the doctors to kind of have that stability as well, or to be able to have those travelers that can come in and really hit the ground running. And that's another complaint that we get on a regular basis, is hospitals get very frustrated with the quality of the travelers that they're getting, and the doctors get frustrated because they feel like they're training people all the time versus this person should be able to come in and kind of hit the ground running, which I agree. Every hospital, if you're going to pay a premium for a traveler, you should be getting, premium results, for the money.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree. So I wanted to back up, because you talked about two super important things. And I know some travel companies already do this, but you guys do it. And I think you guys are making a much more significant deal out of it. And that is bringing in those preceptors to train staff, because there are so many departments out there that have, well, what does it mean to be signed off? And that could mean that 6 months to a year, you have a rather long worked out orientation binder that has been, worked on for years. And there's a real, solid training platform. Or there are other hospitals where that bring you on and you are with Bob for 6 months, and then you're pretty much 3 to 6 months and you're good when he gives us a special wink. And that's something that in the industry we all see. We all know that not everybody has the same experience, but we should all give people a high level of training if we want them to be successful. And you guys have preceptors that you can bring in to help standardize the level of knowledge in a cath lab, which is huge in a lab that has had a lot of turnover, where all of the senior people have either left or retired, leaving this huge gap of knowledge. And the younger crew wants to fill that void, but they just can't because they haven't had the training and it's not available, and the knowledge is really hard to track down. And I think that's something that's really awesome that you guys offer, and you just can't say enough good things about it. There's a lot of people who bring in travelers who hope they have experience and can help train somebody, and I know travelers that didn't know that they were going to come in and train people, and then it was kind of put on them. But like you said, there's different levels of travelers, there's different levels of lab experience, and you don't know what you're getting. But when you say, I'm going to pay for a preceptor to come in and help get my team going, that's a huge deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have kind of, like I said, we've evolved into more than just a staffing company. We've really evolved into more creating a better solution for hospitals. And our long-term goal really is to incorporate all of cardiovascular services, not only again with travelers, but to really fill these needs with permanent employees that are going to be, permanent additions to their departments, and somebody that can really create and help them with these training programs and preceptorships. And the interim might cost a hospital a little bit more money to bring somebody in of high caliber, but it's worth it when you can take one of our preceptors and get somebody literally right out of a cardiovascular program and get them up to speed in less than 6 months. I mean, you think of the money, that yes, you're spending on a preceptor, it could be significant, but to get somebody up to speed at a quicker and faster pace that can kind of take call and be able to take call by themselves, it's a huge deal. And more hospitals, they just don't have the staff to really properly train people to get them to that next level. And
to be perfectly honest, not everybody's cut out to be a preceptor. It sounds bad, but it's true. Not everybody is cut out to be a preceptor, no matter how much experience they have. It's just not for everybody. So some people get forced into doing it. And being a trainee, you don't want to be with the person that got forced to train you. That's the worst, versus having somebody who actually enjoys it. And then the other side of it is hospitals are going to pay for somebody to train a trainee no matter what. They're going to pay a preceptor. So what's the difference between them paying for somebody else? Because they're going to get 2 techs or 2 nurses on one case anyway. So what's the difference between paying them and paying a traveler? Probably not a whole heck of a lot. But the difference is when that trainee is done, feeling like the hospital has invested in them and that they're confident coming off of their training and they're ready to work and they feel good about themselves is so different than coming off feeling like you were bothering your preceptor all the time and that you're not good enough and the doctors are always waiting on you and you feel like you're not good enough for the doctors and you're coming in with that lack of confidence, that everybody already feels like they're not good enough to be in the cath lab because of the amount of work and the type of work that we do. But to be on top of it, being handicapped by poor training, it's a real problem in the cath lab in general. And it's really nice to hear that there are actual options to say, hey, we don't have somebody right now, or we are so busy, we don't have anybody that can do it. Can we get somebody? And it's an option. And to follow up on that too, I think one of the other pieces, we talked about this a lot last week with Teresa, who's a travel leadership, but how do we get into this where you have a toxic environment? And I think you and I have definitely talked about it, where it's a lack of leadership, and you guys also provide leadership, and that is so vital to a lab. And I want to hear how you guys find these leaders to go into these labs, and how they turn around the labs.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have such a large network. We have a very large following. We had a social media online. It's Cath Lab EPIR community, which consists of nearly 2,000 cardiovascular professionals, which include not only just leadership, travelers, permanent staff, anyone that works within the cardiovascular arena. But we have such a large network, a referral-based company, and we just know obviously a lot of the individuals out there, and a lot of those key individuals that are a part of a lot of these labs nationwide. So kind of just with our internal clinical staff that we have, our knowledge in the industry, and also our network of who we're networking with on a daily basis, we're really able to kind of bring everything together to where we can offer these types of leadership, which I think it's very powerful because a lot of facilities right now are suffering. They just don't have. They're working without directors. They're working without managers. You find this to be a very common theme right now in many labs across the nation. So finding them people that have the not only just the education, but also the actual clinical lab experience coming from the lab, learning the lab, and to be in these executive higher level positions in a hospital. It's a critical need right now, and the only way that our future is going to have great leaders in these arenas is if we have to train. We have to train people. We got to promote good leadership within, and that's what kind of promotes the future of our leaders in these departments in the future.
So in general, you guys provide precepting and leadership as well as staffing to facilities, and basically tie it up in a bow in a way that you can turn around a completely toxic environment by providing it all of the things that it needs that nobody else can provide. And by nobody else, I just mean like you can't go to med surg or ICU and find somebody really smart and bring them in and have them help. It's just such a specialized area that, like most hospitals have, like my hospital has 4,000 or 5,000 employees, and we have 30 people who can work in the cath lab all together with Texas nurses. And you guys can provide that additional staffing so that if we were a toxic environment like we can be turned around by having the education that is required, and having the leadership that is required, and having just knowledgeable staff that can make it so you're an environment that doesn't need travelers anymore, which kind of sounds counterintuitive to being a staffing company.
Yeah, correct. And I think, and I think that I think where our industry kind of has got it wrong is that, there's this image that, travelers, we don't want travelers. We don't use travelers. We don't need travelers. But the reality is, why is it all of a sudden, why is the term we don't want travelers, we don't need travelers? That really shouldn't be the case. There is so much value that so many travelers have that hospitals are missing out on. And I think the kind of this mentality of we don't want travelers, they cause problems, they get paid these high premiums, and that creates kind of a stir in our department. It's kind of this far-fetched mentality of, it's usually stemmed upon the fact that they've had a bad experience with maybe a traveler in the past, and they're not open to the idea of doing it again. But again, we're trying to promote, that mentality of let's get away from the traveler versus permanent staff mentality, and let's really try to embrace what travelers can bring to the table. There is so much value. They have, a lot of travelers, have worked in many facilities, have traveled 15, 20 years, and have worked in a multitude of hospitals throughout the country. And they can point out and see and, kind of the things that make sense, the things that don't make sense, the things that they can bring to the table to say, hey, let's look at maybe changing kind of the way we do this to maybe looking at doing something over here like this, and just kind of bringing that outside vision in, but without telling them how to run their departments and without telling them what to do. A lot of facilities are missing out on that. And I think it's very sad. And it's just because they hear the word traveler and they'll hang up on you on the phone because they hear the word traveler and they don't want one. And, I just wish the mentality of the industry, could be that let's embrace the travelers. Let's really welcome them in. Let's make them part of the team. Yes, I get that sometimes they're there 13 weeks, but sometimes they are there 6 months, 9 months, a year, more than a year. And sometimes hospitals, I hate to say it, can't function without them. If they didn't have the travelers there pulling the call and doing the cases, there's a lot of cath labs and EP labs out there and IR labs that wouldn't even be able to exist without them. So I really think kind of the industry as a whole, we really need to come together as one in this arena, and we really need to really value everybody's role in the cath lab, and kind of stop with the let's stop using traveler mentality. Let's really embrace it, and let's make this better than it was yesterday.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about specifically speaks to what we were talking about a second ago with the lack of good leadership, because you'll have people who stare at numbers and don't appreciate the value of, their staff. And if you have an overworked staff, then you don't appreciate your staff. You appreciate meeting a budget quota for your lab. And travelers are a significant quota that or budget buster for labs, and everybody wants to look good. And I think that a lot of times you'll have somebody who has worked in the lab for a long time, and maybe they got their bachelor's, maybe they got their master's, and now they're in management and they've never really been in management. And the first thing they want to do is they want to make upper management happy, and that means by not having travelers, because travelers are expensive. But they don't put the stock in the staff itself and the value in those people and how much it is to replace them. So they don't see that until it's too late. And I think that's one of the pieces that is missing from a lot of labs, is that seasoned managers that are leaders that have done this for a long time and been to a bunch of places have no problems bringing in travelers, especially if it's a good one. But, people with less experience that stare at the budget every day and are worried about their bonuses at the end of the year, they really have a lot of concerns about bringing in travelers. And I know that I'd rather hire 10 travelers over a year than make one bad hire and for a permanent staff who doesn't end up working out, and we spend a year training them only to have them not work out. So I see that as a leadership issue in the hospitals, not a culture of the lab, because I work in the lab every day and I don't hate travelers. I have no issue with travelers coming in. I think they're great. I think if they come in and they do, the work that anybody can do, like if they're going to do heart cases, I can go and work on more advanced projects, or I can really key on other things that I need to do. I think in general, we don't have a problem as staff. I think in general, the problem comes from the leadership who don't want it on the books, and that will come back to haunt them, and it will cost them in staff, because maybe those good ones end up coming work for you.
Sure. Well, and that sometimes does happen, where, an individual will, we actually get these calls every day where somebody's worked in a hospital for 20 years and they don't feel valued anymore. And it gets to the point where, they feel like, again, they kind of are just a number. They just are a component of the lab to keep it functioning, but they're not really valued. And those people are turning to companies like us, not only to, make a monetary change, because obviously we all know that yes, travelers do make a premium amount of money, but along with that comes a lot of high expectations. And I really kind of just want to explain really quickly that you know this, yes, there is a premium amount of money that a traveler makes, but again, there is a high level of expectation that is on every traveler. And when you walk into a facility and you're taking over, a position of somebody that just left the facility after 20 years, well, you're coming in at a point where you have to be able to come in and be able to just go. And so hospitals that are not accustomed to using travelers, that have maybe never used one or have maybe used one many years ago, and they just really haven't had the need to, and then they reach out to us because maybe they have a couple people retire at the same time, or just a couple people leave or move out of state for whatever reason. It's very hard for them sometimes to adapt to bringing in somebody, from the outside, because they're so used to their own ways of how they do things and they're not used to travelers. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge, but we ease that process and we make it very smooth for them, and we make it very easy because, again, the people we're sending them, we're bringing in people at such a high level to where they're coming in and they're not going to cause issues in the department. They're going to help them. And, I really I want hospitals to understand that, travelers should not be used as a Band-Aid solution, right? They should be looking at this as this gets them through a tough time, but yet utilize them throughout for education and training and whatever you need to kind of help your lab, be more efficient. So, I get the budget thing and all that to a point, but at the end of the day, travelers do not cost the hospital that much more money, and the value it can bring is so much greater than the amount of money, like the dollars that are on the contract.
For sure. And I know we just talked about it for a quick second and we're kind of running late on time, but I want to talk about how is it different working for you guys versus other companies? For anybody out there who's thinking about traveling and maybe they want to look you guys up, what sets you guys different from those other companies?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, again, we are a highly specialized agency. Our focus is cardiac cath lab, electrophysiology, and interventional radiology. We encompass all of those components, and we do have a lot of clinical staff within here. So staff, again, that's from the cath lab, from cardiovascular services. So it's always nice to be able to work with somebody that knows the lingo, that understands what you do, that understands the call burden, somebody that can really put yourself in your shoes, and somebody that you can really rely on and trust kind of during your course throughout your assignments at the company. So that is something, again, that a lot of agencies don't offer. These are just a lot of recruiters are from the sales world or have sold different types of sales products during their career, but coming from that clinical side of things, again, it's a trust factor we have with hospitals and with our employees, and we find that the value in that is so significant. So a lot of companies are turning to our agency from the aspect of, if not only are we clinical based, but we really are out there trying to be a great advocate for them. We are trying to bring the market, into a position where, the value is good. The money is great out there for these travelers. It's worth it for them to travel. We try to create a good culture so feel very valued. They don't feel like a number here. They feel very valued by our clinical staff here internally. Chris Mick is our clinical director here at our company, and he is an advocate for all of our travelers. If they're having a bad day or they're having an issue, they can call Chris. And Chris is a former director, been a former traveler, and been a permanent employee. He's been on all sides of the equation, and it's nice to have somebody like that can be an advocate for the travelers that are maybe having a difficult time, or that are in a difficult situation and they don't know what to do. So a lot of companies, the recruiter might just tell them, oh, stick it out and it's only 13 weeks and that. But we truly have situations where, where our travelers call us and they are put into very difficult positions, and we will 100% back that traveler all day long. So yes, we have a hospital we have to please, and make happy. And we have a traveler that we have to be an advocate for. So sometimes it is hard, to make sure that we're, making both sides, happy. But at the end of the day, we really are trying to do the best thing for everyone. And we're really trying to just create an environment where people really feel like, again, they're valued, and that that the trust is at a high level of where they feel like they're appreciated, and they know they're appreciated. And that's really the difference that we have, benefits, insurance, 401k, all those other things. I mean, most all of us companies kind of have all the same similar benefits per se, but really it's the people. It's the people that make the difference. It's the people from within, and it's our internal staff that gives that employee the experience that they can or can't get, at any other company. So that's the value we bring. And it's been wonderful for our client facilities to have a breath of fresh air and to have peace of mind knowing our company highly specializes in this, where a lot of companies don't. And it is nice for them to be able to have a company in their back pocket that they can reach out to at any given point and be able to really help them in any difficult situation. And to have those and have the staff available for them at any given time it's just a great feeling to be able to bring both together.
Yeah, so on that, I think we're going to also talk to Chris so we can get a better understanding of the clinical side of your company by talking to the clinical director. So we can start hitting him up with some questions if you're ready.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and turn this over to Chris. Here you go.
All right, now it's Chris's turn for his portion of the podcast. He is the clinical director for Sharp Medical. He is also a RCIS, and he has been all through the industry. So like Rebecca said, you have done every different job. Let's just start at the beginning with your history. What have you done, and how did you get to where you are today?
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have here? So it all started out, I'm military trained. I started out as one of the managers in the Baghdad ER. And I wanted something a lot better for my family once I got out and entered the civilian sector. One of the things when I started looking at my next role was the cardiac specialty program that the Army back then offered, which it's now kind of joint with the Navy as well. But I started out that, and it's quite a vigorous, intense training, whereas on the civilian side, it goes through and encompasses a couple years. The military takes it through and busts it down into the meat and potatoes, the bread and the butter, just the nitty gritty of what you need to know on the job training, an intense platform, that's basically just encompasses what the military stands for. Once I graduated there, I kind of got thrown right into a supply management role as well as an instructor role that I just ran with. It's one of those opportunities that what I like to tell folks in the military is make the military work for you. Don't work for the military. And it's kind of the same way that I encompass life, which is kind of how I got to this place of where I'm at now with Sharp. During that time, I've gone from assistant management to director, instructor a couple other times. I've done the whole rep aspect as well as joining a couple different companies in travel, and now finishing up my last couple travel assignments with Sharp and joining them as the clinical director.
So you've really seen it from every possible direction, and as part of that, it really gives you a unique perspective on this whole industry that we're in, as far as staffing, being an employee, and being in management, and so on. So how does this affect your hiring process for Sharp? Because you guys have a real different idea. Like, you're not like most travel companies that kind of take most people that are willing, fill out a slip, and of the things that you can do, and we'll find you a place.
Oh, so exactly. So I guess it all stems from the way that I've approached many different Cath labs. I've seen many different ways of leading and different ways of managing, which are two different things that we can get into another topic, another podcast any other day. But I've seen what it takes to lead a very successful lab. I've seen what it takes to destroy what was once a very successful lab, and I'm bringing those different viewpoints, those different scenarios that I've encountered in my career to Sharp. Part of that hiring process as a director and a manager, I've seen various companies that don't vet their travelers like they should, and they're providing a warm body. And that's not to say that that company is providing terrible people each time. It's just they're not meeting the needs of that facility. Whereas one of the things that we do, we like to go through, we like to learn what motivates each different traveler. We like to know exactly the needs that each facility has, and creating a solution that encompasses all of that together. And I'm going to date myself when I say, we're kind of playing Chuck Woolery here. We're being the matchmakers. We're trying to ensure that the person we're matching with that company, with that facility, with that client is exactly what they need, exactly what the department needs, and exactly what their patient population needs.
So how do you do that? How do you filter through, a list of 5 and say, these we're going to take and these we're not going to take? Because you guys don't take everyone.
Absolutely not. But when it comes to the vetting process and ensuring that we're getting the right people for the right job, we say we're the elite staffing company, but the only way to do that is through personal communication. It's through understanding and getting to know each person. Granted, on the phone, a lot of times you're going to get people that are telling you what you need. The hardest part with it is getting to the point where that person can open up with us. We're able to share our vision as a company and to understand what that particular person in their career is seeking, where they've been. And a lot of the times we're going off of a network. So with my time, my 15 years in healthcare here in cardiology, I've you develop a network. We're such a small group that we talk.
We do.
You give one of us 5 minutes, we'll tell you 10 minutes of information, and we won't stop talking about that person, and then it just spreads like a wildfire. So utilizing somebody that has some clinical experience, and I'm not talking 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years of clinical experience. I'm talking 10 plus years. We know people that when we get a traveler come in, there is 1, maybe 2 degrees of separation between them and somebody else that we know.
Absolutely. So what are the keys to what it is that you're looking for? Like, as far as when you see somebody and you want to hire them, what pieces are you looking for?
Well, first, I mean, obviously, we've got to take a look at the resume. Anybody can create a resume that looks absolutely stellar. But once you get that person on the phone, you're talking about clinical situations. You're talking about hemodynamics. You're talking about anatomy. Those are the things where you start to get into, what is this person actually made of? Is this person somebody that we can put our stamp of approval on and send them out to save lives, to educate? We got our preceptors, we got our rapid response folks, we've got the people that the folks that we send out to do consultations to basically adjust culture. It takes a lot of moving parts, a lot of late nights, honestly, because we've got to meet these travelers, these potential travelers and current travelers on their time when they're not busy. So in addition to that, it's providing different scenarios. What would you do in this instance? What would you do, when it came to this patient? What would you do with this physician that's causing these problems, these questions that I've encountered as I've gone through my time in this career? Basically, it's just using what I've learned that works, using the things that I've seen that don't work, and creating my own technique in that. It mainly has everything to do with communication, like what you and I are doing right now, and getting to know that person. I do believe it takes somebody that is passionate about people, and we're not talking about just talking to somebody, but it's listening with more than the intent of just hearing.
I think that's a fine skill that it's really hard. I've been doing this for a long time, and I know that it's hard to sometimes, suss out somebody through just a resume and a quick, 10, 20 minute interview, or maybe it's longer, but sometimes, people are on their best behavior. So I think you kind of like what you're talking about, and what on last week's podcast we talked about is, what you said. We're looking for somebody who has a passion for it, and your passion is going to be reflected in your knowledge base. If you're not passionate, you're not going to know the answers because you're not going to take the time to look it up. And then on top of it, you got to talk about your work ethic, which also is a huge part of it, and I think that if you have a larger knowledge base, you probably have the work ethic to back it up because you had to go home and look it up, and you weren't one of those people that just clocked out. And then the other piece, I think you guys talk about it a lot, but that ethical portion of it is super important. And I think a lot of people really don't understand the value of being able to screen candidates if you've never actually done it yourself. Like, if you've always relied on your manager or HR to screen candidates, you don't see the nitty gritty of how hard it really is to see through somebody's facade that they create to get this place, to get this job, before you suffer the inept of what they don't have that you required. And sometimes that's too late. For us, for hiring, it's so hard because we might only get a couple of candidates, and you're like, do you hire this one or do you wait? And I think with you guys, it's even more so integral because your whole reputation hinges on the quality of your staff walking out the door and representing you to the industry. And if you have one bad traveler, that could close the door on a hospital for you for pretty good length of time.
Absolutely. Turnaround is a big problem with Cath Lab, and vetting these folks and to keep our reputation going is very important. But I think the most important aspect is if we're not vetting the right person, then it's going to affect the patient care that the patient population that facility receives. It's crucial to the safety, of the rest of the staff. Aside, the patient, that's one major thing. Just a smaller aspect is ensuring that we're sending somebody that's qualified to not just be a representative for Sharp Medical, but to be an advocate for the patient.
Yeah. So let's go through what it looks like working for you versus working for the other companies. You know, Rebecca was talking about, like, if you get into difficult situations, your staff can actually call you and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. And since you've been on the other side, you can provide some feedback. So what does that look like for you?
Well, I'll say before I even became a traveler, I was hiring plenty and having to let plenty go. And that's not just a traveler stance, that's a permanent staff as well. But what I was seeing is we'd have these travelers that came in with so much experience. They've seen, in their 15 years in the industry and, however many years traveling, they've been in so many different places. They've seen 25 different ways of doing the exact same thing where they've encompassed and made it their own. And they see some of these cultural problems and these ways that other facilities are not doing things that could be a little more streamlined and benefit that facility from a financial standpoint, from also the safety standpoint, and being a better, like I said, advocate for the patient, that they want to have a voice. They want to be able to say something. They want to share their experiences. But oftentimes you'll get the traveler that they decide to speak up, and they get that target, that metaphorical target painted on their back. And it creates a culture. We're just going to keep using the word culture because I think that seriously is one of the problems that we're encountering in the Cath lab, as well as healthcare as a whole, that nobody wants to speak up because honestly, it's kind of terrifying. But one of the things that our clinical staff here, that I'm here for, is to be the liaison, the go-between between that traveler and the facility, so that if there is a concern, a genuine concern that they have, they finish out that day, they take a break, they come give me a call. That way I can handle that. Our clinical staff can handle that, and they can focus entirely on the reason that they're there. They can focus on the patient. They can focus on helping the facility meet the needs of the patient, changing the culture, educating and precepting the staff.
So on the flip side of it, let's say you have somebody who walks into an environment where, without anything they've done wrong, they are in there with a target on their back due to the fact it's a toxic environment. What do you guys do different than the other travel companies? Because we talked to Brad a few weeks ago, and he kind of basically said, with a lot of travel companies, they basically kind of say, oh, okay, we're going to look into that, if they even say anything at all. And, like you said, they say they grin and bear it and make it that 13 weeks.
We can easily sit here and say, that, 13 weeks isn't a long time. And honestly, in theory, 13 weeks isn't a long time unless you've got that target painted on your back. Then 13 weeks becomes an eternity. What I guarantee with every one of our travelers, when they come to me or when they come to one of our other clinicals with a problem, is, here is exactly how we're going to handle it. We be very transparent and upfront with them on that. And this is the time frame that we're going to get back to you with the remedy, with the fix, with whatever solution needs to be resolved with that situation. Rather than blowing smoke, it creates a lot of respect back and forth. It creates not only just a lot of loyalty, but it gives that traveler and the facility the opportunity to focus on the job they have at hand, instead of the putting out fires or trying to deter that target that's getting painted on their back. So
because I know that one of the concerns that a lot of people have is being on an island. And I can tell you from personal experience, I have been on an island and it didn't feel good. And I know that a lot of newer people don't know what to say and to who to say it to. as far as traveling, before, when you're in a staff situation, you can go to your manager ignores you. You can go to the director, your director ignores you. You can go to the silent reporting and report it there. I don't know many places where it gets to that third option where you go to HR, you go to the silent reporting line that you call and leave messages on. But with traveling, I know there's a lot of places where a lot of people feel like they don't have that support and that you're just on your own. And it's good to hear that somebody is actually taking the time to say, yeah, we're going to create a solution and we have your back. And that's a huge difference, because I've seen it myself, and I know that Brad talked about it, and that this is a pretty common theme in traveling, is that you are on an island. Everybody will promise you the world until you get out there, and then all of a sudden, when you have questions, they don't get back to you so fast, or the answer isn't what you wanted to hear in the first place, and now you're kind of regretting that decision to sign on there.
Oh, absolutely. And this is all coming from experience and seeing the different ways that travelers, even when I was a traveler, the way things were handled, and knowing that there is a better way. And like on one of your previous podcasts, you discussed the whole, management versus leader aspect. And I think that's what brings out a good leader, is somebody that can, it's changing the way we currently do things, because all too often we hear this is the way it's always been done.
Exactly.
It's not the way it has to be done. There's always a different approach. Every circumstance doesn't require A, B, and C. We also have X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, my brother, to make him slightly famous, he'll love me for this. He has the best phrase I've ever heard. He'll ask somebody, well, that's the way I've always done it. Well, how long you been doing it that way? I've been doing it this way for 18 years. Well, gee, that's an awfully a long time to be doing it the wrong way. And I've always loved that. It's like, yeah, just because you've done it a long time doesn't make it right. And it can absolutely be done the wrong way for a long time and still kind of work.
Well, absolutely. And like I said, all these, having done this for a long time and been in different places, this is the way we've always done it. It all too often is the problem. It all too often, that is what has led to the issues in needing a traveler in the first place.
Absolutely. That very much, this is the way we're going to do it. We're not going to bring in new ideas. And that's what Teresa talked about last week too, is specifically, foster, your top performers, spending 80% of your time with your top performers and letting them lead and run with these new ideas and putting the energy into it. That's only going to encourage them more. But by shutting people out, by closing the doors, and this is the way we've always done it, that's something that, like you said, discourages people, and it discourages your leaders. It discourages your top performers from wanting to stick around because they don't feel valued. If they get the same or less attention than a lower performer, then what's the point? They'll go find somebody who will recognize them and reward them the way that they feel that they should be, and they will continue to exceed. Those people don't just relegate themselves down. They don't just, go down into complacency. They leave. They find somebody else. They find something else, a new shiny thing, because they're not going to change who they are. They're just going to change where they work.
Absolutely. And that's the easiest way. We get set in our ways and stuff, but like you said, that new shiny thing, that we're not having to change ourselves to meet that. We're going and finding something that suits our way of doing things and our goals and our vision and what we stand for, in a much simpler and easier way of getting there.
Yeah. So to kind of separate your guys out, so what other benefits are there to working with you as far as like referral bonuses and things like that, getting your friends involved, that you would know more about, being that you're the clinical director of Sharp?
I will say that one of the things that, as soon as I came on, I having traveled for a while and having managed supply and having had to take care of the lead portion, and ensuring that we've got the right lead for travelers, that becomes quite the joke among facilities is we're giving you the lead that doesn't have too many holes in it. It doesn't weigh a ton, but it weighs close to it. One of the things we want to do is be able to get lead into the hands of people. And, I know other companies are doing it as well, but it comes, what cost is it coming at? You're waiting at 9 months, you're waiting a year, you're waiting a year and a half before you're giving your travelers lead. Well, that's a year and a half, 9 months, whatever it may be, of lost protection that person is getting. So safety is a very important factor in the cath lab, because we've got people doing these EP cases, these IR cases, where you're scrubbed in for hours upon hours. Well, the last thing somebody's body needs is more radiation and an extra 10 pounds, 5 pounds, 10 pounds in that lead. At the end of the day, it's a ton of bricks.
Absolutely.
So we're definitely providing, we've got options for like day one lead. And I stress that immensely. We made sure we got the best lead that we can actually do. I don't know if I can give a plug into Infab, but if I can't, then get rid of that.
No, you absolutely can. I don't know anybody over there, but I know some of my top cardiologists seek those guys out specifically. So that's more than fine.
Okay, great. Well, there we go. So we made sure we get a good deal with Infab that gives them the top quality lead. I mean, it's as good as you can get with anybody else. We all know, as being in this for a while, that Infab and a couple of the others are great. Additionally, just like Rebecca said, we've got our benefits. We've got the health care, we've got the 401k and all that everybody else has. But one of the extra things we have is a sign-on bonus. And it's at the moment, it is a $10,000 sign-on bonus that encompasses roughly 2 to 2.5 years of work to get there. Very similar to what some of these permanent staff are getting with facilities as far as sign-on bonuses are concerned.
Right on.
Yeah,
I think that sets you guys apart. I mean, I think a lot of those things, I think the lead kind of speaks to exactly what you guys are talking about, is being different from day one. I think everybody should buy their own lead if you can, but I think especially travelers should have their own lead. It needs to fit you well. It needs to be yours. It needs to be clean. It needs to work. And having your own protective equipment, I know it's an investment, and if you guys are willing to make the investment, that's even better. I know that I paid $800 for my lead, and I have my own personal lead, and I recommend everybody do that, to go buy the best protection with the lightest weight that you can afford and put it on, because it's like a good pair of shoes. It'll pay dividends to have it. And that kind of speaks for a symbol of your company, that this is something that you want to do. You want to take care of your employees by giving them something that seems basic, but it isn't. Having a good fitting lead is, absolutely invaluable to anybody. Nurse, tech, it doesn't matter. Anybody who works in radiation needs good fitting, lightweight lead. And I sound like a commercial for Infab right now.
You sound like a great commercial, Jeremy.
I know, but it's so true. Like, I bought my own lead 2 years ago, and I should have bought my own lead 10 years ago. And it was stupid to think that I should just go to hospitals and make them pay for it. They will, and they should, and that's great that they do. But ultimately, you should have your own lead, and you should have it on day one, like you're saying, because it is super important, and it helps change your day. Because I know my back is completely different now than it was 2 years ago. So I think that's an awesome way to kind of sum up what you guys are and what you guys are about, because it's definitely nice to see a travel company that really cares about its employees and treating them like employees rather than, traveling staff, rather than a number. And being on the other side of it, it's nice to hear that somebody wants to treat regular staff like that, because people make a life decision. Like we had Brad on, and it's not something he does. I mean, he does it for money, but he doesn't do it for money. He does it for the lifestyle. He does it to be in Southern California for 6 months when he wants to be in Southern California for 6 months, and then take 3 months and go off to Europe and India and wherever else he wants to go. And he does it for that lifestyle. It's not that he can't get a job. Every place he goes wants to hire him. So it's good to hear that people treat people like Brad like employees rather than independent contractors, was what the word I was looking for.
That's a great way of putting it. And you're what I get told all the time is, yeah, but that the lead and that bonus, that's coming out of the traveler's pay. Some places, yes, it does, but I can guarantee you here that's not coming out of your total pay as a traveler. That's coming out from us as a company, because we are wanting to support that traveler. We're wanting to make sure that they're safe. We're wanting to make sure that they have the tools and the resources they need to not have to worry about anything else other than focusing on the patient, focusing on the facility, and doing the job that they were hired to do.
Absolutely. And I can't say enough good things about that kind of mentality for staff, because if you value them, they will value you and they will provide loyalty. And I think you guys have already seen that, and you will continue to see that. And hopefully, people hearing this podcast, it'll really help them change their mind about who they want to represent them as for a travel company, who they want to work for. If they want to work for somebody, maybe they have their own lead, but they just want to work for somebody who provides lead, just because I want to work for the person that cares enough to provide lead.
Oh, correct. And that's, same way. I had my own lead, and once you get to a certain age, man, you're going to want those suspenders. So I look into that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, Chris, for being on the podcast, and you'll have to thank Rebecca for me, because she's on the other side of that mic over there, and we will have to end it there.
Hey, thank you, sir. Thanks for having us on, and thanks for what you do.
No problem. Thank you. Once again, a special thanks to Chris Mick and Rebecca Jones for being on the podcast and taking time out of your day, or night in this case. Guys, these guys came in at 8 o'clock at night into the office to have this conversation with me so that I could record it. And it was awesome. So thanks again, guys. And if you guys want to reach out to either Chris Mick or Rebecca Jones, you can either find their contact information on sharpmedicalstaffing.com. You can reach out to me, or I'll include a link in the show notes down below if you guys want to reach out to them. If you're interested in traveling with them, or you just have some questions for them, I'm sure they'd be willing to answer those for you. And if you guys think we left anything out on the podcast, feel free to let me know. Facebook, email, all of that's working great. I've been getting a lot of your messages, and I look forward to fulfilling your requests for that show coming soon. Also, just a little bit of housework. If you guys want to donate to the podcast to make this something that I don't have to do between 8 and 9 o'clock at night, maybe I can do it a little bit earlier in the day so I'm not taking so much call. Feel free to donate to the podcast by clicking on the donate button on the website. That'll bring you to a Patreon webpage. That's how most podcasters kind of fund their hobby. And I hope to kind of get something going with that, so that way I can spend a little bit more time at home doing this and a little less time at work. So feel free to donate to that. But most importantly, please tell everybody you know about this podcast and share it on your Facebook. Let everybody in each group know what's going on, and hopefully I can get to a topic that you want to hear about, because that's always going to energize my listeners to spread it a little bit more. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.